In 1897, doctors across America and Britain warned that a single machine could ruin a woman's face forever, leave her flushed, wrinkled, and permanently disfigured. Newspapers called it bicycle face. It was completely made up, but it worked, because the real fear wasn't a woman's face, it was what was underneath her. For the first time, women were riding away from home alone, wearing pants under their skirts, going wherever they wanted, whenever they wanted. A two-wheeled contraption invented to survive a horse famine had somehow become the most dangerous thing in America. This is the story of how the bicycle went from a scandal that terrified Victorian society to the machine strapped into 1 million American living rooms today. To understand the bicycle, you have to start with a volcano. In 1815, Mount Tambora in Indonesia erupted in the largest volcanic explosion in recorded history. Ash spread across the globe, blocking sunlight for months. 1816 became known as the year without a summer. Crops failed across Europe. Hay became scarce, and without hay, horses starved. Thousands of them died, and the ones that survived became too expensive for ordinary people to keep. In Germany, a civil servant and inventor named Karl von Drais saw the problem clearly. If horses were disappearing, people needed another way to get around. In 1817, he built a strange wooden contraption. 2 wheels in a line, a seat in the middle, and a handlebar for steering. There were no pedals. You sat on it and pushed yourself along with your feet, like running while sitting down. He called it the Luft machine, the running machine. On June the 12th, 1817, he rode it nearly 7 miles in just over an hour, faster than a horse-drawn coach on the same road. It wasn't just a novelty, it was the first practical alternative to the horse in human history. Drais's invention crossed borders fast. The British called it a hobby horse, or less kindly, a dandy horse, because it became a fashion accessory for wealthy young men who rode them through parks to be seen. But without pedals, riders still had to push off the ground with their feet, and the craze faded within a couple of years. The real leap came decades later in the 1860s when French inventors attached pedals directly to the front wheel. This new machine, the velocipede, quickly earned a nickname that tells you everything: the bone shaker. Iron tires on cobblestone streets rattled riders to the bone. Then came a design that looked almost absurd: the penny farthing, named after 2 British coins, a large penny and a tiny farthing mirroring its mismatched wheels. A gigantic front wheel meant more distance per pedal stroke, so bigger wheels meant more speed. But sitting 5 feet in the air over a wheel that size came with a price. Any bump, rut, or stray dog could pitch a rider headfirst over the handlebars in what cyclists grimly called taking a header. These machines were fast, fashionable, and expensive, toys for wealthy young men willing to risk a broken collarbone for status. In 1885, a British engineer named John Kemp Starley rebuilt the bicycle from the ground up. His creation, the Rover Safety Bicycle, had 2 wheels of equal size, a chain driving the rear wheel, and a seat positioned low and safely behind the front wheel. No more headers, no more towering wheels, just a stable, practical machine that looked remarkably like the bikes we ride today. 3 years later, a Scottish inventor named John Boyd Dunlop, trying to give his son a smoother tricycle ride, reinvented the pneumatic tire, a rubber tube filled with air. Paired with Starley's safety frame, the bicycle suddenly became fast, comfortable, and for the first time, genuinely safe. And that combination did something no earlier bicycle ever had. It made cycling accessible to almost anyone, including, for the first time in large numbers, women. By the 1890s, millions of women around the world were cycling. And to a lot of Victorian society, that was terrifying. It wasn't really about safety. It was about what a bicycle let a woman do: leave the house without a chaperone, travel wherever she wanted, arrive somewhere on her own terms. Critics of the era called this the woman question, and the bicycle became its battleground. The clothing fight came first. Long skirts and corsets were genuinely dangerous around bicycle chains and wheels, so women started wearing bloomers, loose trousers gathered at the ankle. To modern eyes, they look almost comically modest. To Victorian newspapers, they were scandalous. A woman's clothing edging dangerously close to a man's. Cartoonists mocked bloomer-wearing cyclists mercilessly, and in some cities, women on bicycles were harassed, even attacked, simply for riding in public. Then came the medical scare. A handful of doctors began warning of something they called bicycle face, a supposed condition where the strain of cycling would leave a woman's face permanently flushed, tense, and disfigured. Newspapers ran the warnings uncritically. Some physicians went further, claiming cycling could damage a woman's health in vague, alarming ways never actually demonstrated. None of it held up to real scrutiny. Most doctors at the time were skeptical, but the story was persuasive precisely because it borrowed the authority of medicine to police something that had nothing to do with health, and through all of it, plenty of women simply kept riding anyway. Susan B. Anthony, one of the leading voices of the American suffrage movement, said the bicycle had done more for women's freedom than almost anything else in the world, because for the first time a woman could get on a machine and go without asking anyone's permission. What started as a scandal became quietly one of the era's most powerful symbols of independence. Chapter 5. The Bubble, the Roads, and the Wright Brothers. While the culture war played out, the bicycle was quietly reshaping the country in ways almost nobody expected. First came the frenzy. By the mid-1890s, bicycles were wildly popular and wildly profitable, and speculators poured money into bicycle manufacturers hoping to cash in. It was a genuine boom, followed, within just a few years, by a bust, as the market cooled and the craze faded into ordinary daily use. But before the bust, cyclists had already changed America permanently through its roads. In the late 1800s, American roads outside cities were often just dirt and gravel, mud in the winter, dust in the summer, barely passable by anything with wheels. Cyclists, organized through a national group called the League of American Wheelmen, launched a campaign known as the Good Roads Movement, lobbying state and federal governments for smoother, paved streets. Their pressure led to the creation of the Office of Road Inquiry in 1893, the direct ancestor of what eventually became the modern federal highway system. When cars showed up a couple of decades later, they inherited a paved road network that cyclists had already fought to build. And one more detail connects the bicycle to a completely different kind of transportation history. In Dayton, Ohio, two brothers ran a small bicycle repair and manufacturing shop. The mechanical skills they sharpened building and fixing bikes, precision, balance, lightweight engineering, became the foundation for their next project. Their names were Wilbur and Orville Wright. Chapter 6. From Toy to Fitness Icon. By the early 1900s, the bicycle craze had cooled, and a new machine was stealing the spotlight, the automobile. For decades in car-obsessed America, the bicycle slid into the background, mostly remembered as a kid's toy rather than a serious way to get around. Then, in 1973, an oil crisis changed everything again. Gas prices spiked, lines at the pump stretched for blocks, and suddenly Americans were looking for an alternative that didn't need fuel at all. Bicycle sales briefly outpaced car sales for the first time in decades. But this time, the bicycle wasn't just transportation, it was rebranded as fitness. Adults who hadn't ridden since childhood were suddenly buying bikes for exercise, not errands. That reframing never really stopped. Decades later, indoor cycling studios turned pedaling into a full workout culture, and companies built entire fitness empires around a bike with a screen bolted to the front, streaming workouts into people's living rooms. So the machine that started as an emergency response to a horse famine became a Victorian scandal that terrified an entire society, ended up as one of the most common pieces of exercise equipment on Earth. Same two wheels, same basic idea Karl von Drais sketched out in 1817, just a completely different reputation.